that I work with, oftentimes they're already confident about their leadership skills. What happens is they don't feel confident that their leadership skills translate. And maybe this is something that you've experienced before, where you know you're good at a certain skill, but when you have to do it in English, it's not imposter syndrome because you're confident in the skill. It's really this lack of confidence in the execution, the delivery, the grammar, the word structure. So this is why this kind of leadership communication training is not the standard approach. It really takes into account your experience as a non-native speaker. So the three pillars that I focus on for leadership communication are confidence, clarity, and connection. Today, we're going to talk specifically about confidence. Now, let's take a look at this quote. The unaccented speakers were on average 23% likelier to have gotten funding. When you hear statistics like that, it does not boost your confidence. It's really intimidating to hear these statistics of whether it's discrimination, accent bias, people getting opportunities because they speak better than you. And so this is not about making you feel worse. This is just to highlight the reality that's out there. And then we're going to break it down in a way that is productive. So what I find, yes, of course, there is an accent bias that some people will face. A lot of times what I see happening is it's not necessarily the accent. It's when the accent hurts your clarity. And so that's why with this program and the training that I encourage you through the podcast and in all of our resources, it's about really targeting the specific English improvement that you need. At this point, you're probably upper intermediate to advanced. It can still feel like I need more English. I need more words. I need more vocabulary. But what I tell everyone that I work with is it's not about building more. You already did the hard part. You already learned the language. What can cause insecurity is that you feel like it's not enough. It's not good enough. It's not as good as your native language. So a way to build your confidence is to really analyze what you need. So let's talk about 4 specific things that you can do to help build your confidence in English. The first thing that I recommend is defining your executive presence. Executive presence is a big deal, and I want to empower you to embrace that executive presence is also nonverbal. A lot of how people perceive you happens just by looking at you, observing you, watching you. So I want you to feel empowered that there's a lot of things you can do today that will make you be perceived as a more confident leader wherever you are in terms of your English confidence. Now, something interesting that I find when I'm working with leaders is we all hear, like, oh, improve your executive presence. But something that I do as a foundation is really help you define your executive presence. There are so many different types of leaders, and it's not about being like them. It's about appreciating the kinds that inspire you and then choosing the qualities that you want to emulate. So what is authentic to your personality? Because maybe you admire leaders who are super charismatic and energetic, but you're calmer and you have no desire to be that kind of motivational speaker. So it's important to analyze what do you appreciate versus what do you appreciate and want to incorporate in your leadership style. So once you define your executive presence, that really impacts everything. And I work really hard. It seems really simple, pick 3 words, but we spend a lot of time digging deep and making sure we get the right 3 words because that's the foundation for all of your communication. It's the foundation for how you walk, how you interact, your small talk, your networking, your emails. So this is something that I would really encourage you to take your time with and really think it through because it's a simple activity that has a tremendous impact. Something else that I would love for you to consider is your body language. Again, what I focus on for today for you are all of the things that you can implement immediately. Part of the training that I do, because it's not about teaching English, you already did that. The part of leadership communication that's special for you as a non-native speaker, it's finding out the most efficient way to get quick results that make a big impact. So what is the English that you need to succeed, especially in these leadership positions? So body language, this is something that, again, nonverbal. You can have the exact English that you have, but this impacts not only how you're perceived, but how you feel. It also impacts your breathing because if you're constantly hunched over, whether it's a bad habit or insecurity, your lungs are also more compact. When you don't have full breathing range, that's going to hurt your fluency. There are a lot of physiological things that we focus on in the program that you don't even realize how much they impact your fluency. And when you're not feeling fluent, that completely kills your confidence. So this is something that is different for you as a leader who's a non-native speaker. These are things that you need to train that perhaps your colleagues who are native speakers don't really have to think about. And it's not good or bad. It's just something that now you know you have the resource to be able to do. So for body language, a few quick moments that I want you to observe today and this week. How do you look when you're in virtual calls? So many people, their heads are really low, their posture is bad. Or, for example, if I sit back in my chair, this is what I look like. And if you can't see me right now, because I'm leaning back, my head is a lot lower. The posture doesn't look as confident. Yes, I'm super comfortable, but it's about finding a way to be comfortable, but also look confident. When you're in a call, I like to, and I do this for all my clients, I have them send me videos of their meetings and we analyze them. And one of the first things I do is put the video on mute. If I'm not listening to anyone, there is no accent bias. If I'm just looking at the screen, who looks like the one in charge? And that can be really telling. And a lot of times the people who are the most in charge are the ones that look, I mean, I know that this is relatively new of having so many virtual calls, but it's been enough years. Something simple you can do, that what I do is I have a pillow that I put to kind of boost my lumbar support. And that helps me force myself to sit a certain way. When I have a desk and I notice that I'm leaning over like this, I'll just make sure that I lean like this. So just pushing your shoulders back, you can still be comfortable, but I want you to be perceived with more authority. And when you see yourself, when you look that confident, it's really empowering. You're like, oh, sometimes it can help you forget that you're nervous because you look so confident. So these are moments that are really important because you're also inspiring people by how you walk, how you sit. These are all ways that you elevate your company and you elevate your team. And I like to think of it as you're also inspiring other people who, whether they aspire to be you, or maybe they're also non-native speakers and they see you succeeding at these roles. I think that's a really important part of the impact that you have, not only on your company, but on your industry and whatever minority you represent in the world. I think that's something that we carry, that we have the opportunity to do, that is a special moment and something that we can use to appreciate. So again, for body language, the quickest one is look at how you present yourself virtually. The other way I recommend is start looking at your reflection when you're walking in the street. And I do this myself. I'll try to catch my reflection and take a moment and just think, if you saw that person, what would you think? Not in a critical way, but in a confidence way. Does that person, when you see them, do they look confident? Or does that person look anxious and rushed and hunched over? Sometimes just walking too fast gives that anxious energy, and just by slowing your walk, sometimes that can help you look more confident. It also helps you feel calmer. More often than not, it's going to be the posture. Really bring your posture up. This is something that if you struggle with that, it could be changing the way you work out, maybe doing some workout routines that strengthen your core or your back muscles to make it easier so you don't have to think about it all the time. A third tip that I have for you today, and this has to do with the English. I'll focus more on this in the clarity section of the program. However, it's also important for the confidence portion. Identify high frequency words. Because part of your lack of confidence or your insecurity is your English, and it could be your accent, it's not always about wanting to sound like an American or like you don't have an accent. It's okay to have an accent. Pretty much everyone I work with embraces their accent, but you want to make sure that you're understood. And that's a difference. There's a difference between accent reduction for the purpose of sounding more American. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's your goal. This is especially important, for example, for actors who have to do dialect coaching, or if you're a voiceover artist and you have to have a certain regional accent. In terms of corporate, it's going to be more about making sure that you're understood. In the clarity portion of the program, it's more about messaging, but as a non-native speaker, pronunciation is also a component. So what I recommend is instead of feeling overwhelmed, like, oh, I don't have time to improve my pronunciation of every word in the English language, or I don't have time to learn 400 more verbs and phrasal verbs or prepositions, it's going to be about identifying what words are important to your daily life. A really quick way to do this is go through your company's website. Can you pronounce all the words on the website that are important to the mission of your company, the services that you provide or sell? How do you feel about those? And sometimes those are the words that are causing you the most problems that you might not have even realized. A lot of times when I'm working with tech companies, some of the words that their leaders struggle with the most are words like server because of the V sound. And when you deal with cloud computing and when you deal with all these other services, server is a very important word. Technology. When you work at a tech company, technology is really important. And sometimes there I usually see the emphasis being in the wrong syllable. And with other mispronunciations, it can cause some confusion. So this is where you want to make sure the words that you use on a daily basis. What I do for my clients is I have them send me different audio samples and I identify those words for them. This is something you can also do for yourself. Really make sure that the words you use all day, every day, that you're saying as clearly as possible. And that's immediately going to help you being understood, because sometimes if a person doesn't understand one word because it just sounds so different, then they get distracted and they don't listen to the rest of your message. And if people aren't listening to your messages, as a leader, I mean, that's half of the point of you being there. So that can cause conflict on an interpersonal level and even from a directive level, making sure that people understand what you need them to do. And last but not least, something that is hugely important, and this is for all three sections, but we start working on your breathing at the very beginning of the program. So what I want you to do starting today is to breathe more intentionally. If this is something that you haven't done before, then what I recommend is just start by observing your breath. Observe, more specifically, observe when you stop breathing. A big part of being in a leadership position as a non-native speaker is, honestly, it's the breathing. Because what you have done, what 99% of the people that I work with, you develop the bad habit from when you're first starting with your English journey of not breathing when you're listening. And this happens when you're learning another language because there's that tension that you want to make sure you understand what the other person's saying. It's an unfamiliar language. And so you develop the habit of not breathing when you're listening. You don't need to do that anymore, but you're probably, again, I'm 99% sure you're still doing it. And this is huge because what you don't realize that does is it increases your heart rate. Your body is in a constant state of tension and it increases your anxiety. So just by observe this week how often you're, even right now, are you breathing as you're listening? When you're watching a show tonight or a movie, are you breathing? Just check yourself. And when you realize how often you're holding your breath, it's incredibly enlightening. And most of the time, you don't even need to, it's not like you're doing it intentionally. It's a bad habit that you're holding on to. Now, once you observe it, that's when I come in. We figure out when you're still holding your breath, the strategies that you can do to breathe more effectively. And when you're able to be conscious of that breath, that then is going to also help you become a better speaker. Because once you realize how you're breathing and you're empowered by that, then we get into the micro strategies of the half breath and the quarter breath and connected speech and how that impacts your fluency, your intonation. So this is something that's really important for that high level skill. But even from the immediate impact, breathing more is going to increase your fluency. When you are not breathing because you're listening, and then it's your turn to speak, you're starting to speak with no air. Your heart is accelerated. When you're in that state of tension, your mind does go into fight or flight. And when you're in that state of hypervigilance, it's not conducive at all to fluency nor creativity. And when you're in a leadership position, your creativity is very valuable. And what I mean by that is being able to use all of your experience, pick the experiences that are relevant, make a plan mentally, be able to process that and be able to convey that and share that with your team in a concise way that drives the mission forward. But when you're not breathing, when you're stuck in this fight or flight, when you can't think of those memories because your brain is just trying to survive and it's giving you the most basic English, that's when you feel like you freeze, you can't think of the right word, even though it's a word you know. All of those moments of frustration, a lot of times have to do with something as simple as breathing. Once we get the breathing down, then we are able to explore what are some other mental blocks that you have that are impacting your fluency negatively. But this is one that you can start doing today. So I want you to feel empowered that being a more confident, fluent leader, there are basic things that you can do. There are small things that you can start doing today to elevate your confidence and your executive presence. So once again, to boost your confidence, 4 things that I want you to do are to define your executive presence, figure out who are you in this leadership world, improve your body language, make sure you're taking up the screen in the virtual calls, make sure your posture, your back is straight and your chin is elevated when you're walking, and also walk slower. It's interesting to see how many people are just rushing around, but just by walking around more calmly, you can have a wonderful impact on your executive presence. Next, for the English specifically, identify high frequency words. So make sure you make a list. I would start with 10 words, look them up, listen to audio samples, and figure out where you're perhaps not saying those as clearly as you could, and practice. And of course, breathing more intentionally. The first thing I want you to do is observe your breath. Just figure out where you're holding your breathing. Just get more comfortable with your breathing patterns. Don't criticize yourself. We're just observing. You can't change, you can't improve what you don't know that you're doing. And so a big part of this kind of training is, in addition to leadership communication, as a non-native speaker, there are so many other moments that you don't even know are what's actually hurting your communication. And that's why when you're working with someone like me, I'm there to help you use my experience to pinpoint those in the most efficient way possible and get you unblocked. All right, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to share some of this program with you. I'm going to share some of the other pillars in the next couple of episodes. If you're interested in joining the Leadership Communication Accelerator, or if you work in HR, learning and development, and you know of any leaders that could use this kind of training, go to tanyasuarez.com/leadership. I hope you have a beautiful day, and let me know in the comments where you're from, what industry you work in, and what other kind of trainings I can do for you to help you be a more confident leader so that you can lead in English without any anxiety. Wouldn't that be a beautiful thing? And you can do it. I promise. It is not an unattainable goal for you. And when you're not burdened and blocked by anxiety, you're able to have a greater impact and influence people around you and be the kind of leader that you know you can be.